Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Good
can.
afternoon, Miss.
Hey,
Good afternoon, Mr. Wilkinson.
good afternoon. Sorry about the delay. McGee, Miguel.
Hey, I'm ready up.
Yeah, apparently, I think what happened is I had to do some kind of re-download of Zoom or something.
Okay, you must. Okay, then. So your Zoom wasn't working then.
Yeah, because my original Zoom icon and all that was not responding for some reason. And then when I went in to download it again, in the middle of the download again, the screen popped up with you guys. So
Okay.
I don't know if it just picked it up somewhere along the way. Yeah. So I'm gonna go with that until my class is over, and then afterwards I'll run another test to make sure it's fully downloaded.
Sounds good. I'll
Okay.
be here.
Okay. Thanks, McGee.
All right.
Okay. So hello everybody. Sorry about that delay. I hope you took the time to do a little reading. Does anybody remember where we stopped the last class? Did we start audit planning yet?
Mr. Wilkinson,
Hi.
before we begin, Ronaldo had messaged a little before 6, and said he'd run into a hurdle, but he'll be late.
Okay, he'll be here a little
Yes,
later.
sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
great, great.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
You'll catch up along the way. All right. So did we start? I don't think we started auditing. I think we ended um, on the previous discussion. Anybody remembers? Where we stopped the last time?
I think it was near the first module. I don't remember seeing auditing planning last session.
Yeah, I know we've done two modules so far. Audit planning is our third module, so which we'll start tonight uh, and get into some of the fourth module, and then we'll pick up the rest of it next week. Don't forget, week after next is your midterm already. Time flies when you're having fun, so please use every available time that you have to read, make notes, study the key stuff. The examination is not going to be, there are not going to be any tricks. I'm going to ask you questions directly from your modules. You're not going to have to go and find stuff in the fine print. Everything is going to come from your modules. So if you become familiar with them and understand the key points, okay, the definitions, the objectives, the reasons, the advantages, the disadvantages, what audit planning is, what are the audit planning steps, the whole issue about um, how audit evolved in the first. Once you understand those things, there will not be any surprises. Right? So please, please start early so you don't have to stress. All right, so we're in week number 4 already. Lishan, are you there?
Good afternoon. Yes,
Good
I am.
afternoon. Yes, excellent. Armand, yes, is there. And Shamik. Shamik? Okay. Guess Shamik is going to show up very shortly. Okay, any questions about what you've read, heard, all that stuff so far about the audit process? Hopefully you found some interesting and enlightening things that you can carry off with you already. I haven't forgot that I will be assigning you a little audit case. Um, I'm going to do that very shortly, in the next week or so. Just wanted you to get some information under your belt. So when you get started, you have something to work with. I've designed the case so that it's not due until the end of the semester, so you have a lot of time to do it. And the reason why I do that is so that you can have as much information from your modules to go with any research that you may choose to do to build your case. Okay. So that will be forthcoming very soon. Any other kinds of questions, concerns?
I was just a bit kind of intrigued. I wanted to know, like, what kind of questions would we be facing? Like, would they be multiple choice, short answers, essays, problems? I just
Yeah,
want to have an idea of how to kind of frame my answers when I start to
yeah,
do my notes.
yeah, certainly, certainly. Um, the exam will be consist of multiple types of questions. You have some definitions. You have mostly short answer questions. I sometimes throw in a couple of multiple choice and true false questions just to make it interesting, but the primary context would be being able to define specific terms in auditing and then answering short answer questions about the nature type audit and the different kinds of audit um, that we'll be studying along the way. So that's how you can be thinking about it. Again, there might be one or two multiple choice and short answer questions, but they will not be the majority. The majority will be primarily short answer questions, and then of course definitions. Okay? Uh, I don't know if I mentioned it before. Your midterm exam, I believe I said, will be, if I'm not mistaken, will be virtual, but your final exam will have to be at the institute. Um, the institute has all the facilities, so you don't have to worry about the blah blah blah. There's adequate spacing, room for everybody, and all that stuff. And it's not too many of you guys, so you should be fine. Okay. But as far as I recall, the midterm exam is scheduled to be virtual. I'll confirm that for you so that you can know for sure how to plan. Right. Good question. Any other questions before we go on? All right, the midterm exam will be on everything we covered from the beginning up to next week's class. And then the final exam will be everything that we cover after the final midterm exam to the end of the semester. So you have an idea there as well on how to schedule your study and your time. Okay, can you see my screen as well? Audit planning?
I
Yes, we can.
can.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, great. Let's see. Shamik, are you with us now? Not yet. All right. So what is audit planning? We have already talked about, the auditors went from looking for fraud and errors to what is fair and presentable in the eyes of the auditor. We talked about the responsibilities that the auditor is expected to take versus the responsibility that the auditor chooses to take. Like, guys, we're coming here with our audit plan to conduct an audit of your financial statements. We're not here to find out everybody who's stolen from the company over the last year and find all the errors that they made. That's not why we're here. We're here to find out if your financial statement presents a true and correct presentation based on GAAP, generally accepted accounting and auditing principles. But if we find that somebody committed fraud, embezzled from the company, we will disclose it. We will tell on them. If we find any errors, we will bring those errors to the forefront so that the company may correct those errors. Now, I'm sure you must know that one of the examinations questions will be, what is the difference between error and what?
Fraud.
Yeah, fraud. What is the difference between error and fraud? And clearly, uh, that's going to be one of your questions because it's so fundamental to not only business in general, but the audit process as well. Okay? So the battle rages on between true and fair, and fraud versus errors. But at the end of the day, auditors understand that there is a certain expectation that they should be looking to try to determine whether or not there's any fraud going on in the company based on their audit plan, and certainly to audit in such a way that if there are any obvious errors, um, they can detect them. Does anybody remember what we said were the hardest errors to find or frauds to find in an organization? Frauds that occur where?
Things on the balance sheet. Was it? I may could be wrong.
Not
Cash
on the balance sheet, but rather, it
Drive.
might be, but rather,
income statement.
mind you, it's interesting. Frauds do occur on those statements, but that's not where the biggest frauds occur. The biggest frauds occur, remember where? At the top of the organization,
Oh,
Okay.
top management. Yeah.
top management. Now, some of that may involve top management cooking the books, messing around with the income statement and the balance sheet, changing numbers to satisfy some egg that they're up to. But usually, the biggest frauds in most organizations are not done by you guys and me in the middle, down the line, and all that stuff. It's done by people in top management because they have the information and the authority to mess with stuff, intimidate people, sneak around. They have access to every bloody thing, and other people have no such access. Okay, and so if their governance and their ethics are bad, as we've seen in many organizations in recent years, organizations will continue to suffer. Not only that, top management is also the culprit who tries to bribe auditors when they come in. So when auditors find stuff, some of those guys are so bold and brazen, they'll say, I'll give you more money. I'll bring you back next year for another audit and pay you more than you need to be paid if you just not tell anybody about what you found. Now, if you're an audit manager or partner, any of you in this class already, what should be your position? What should be your position? If senior management says, don't talk, I'll do you a great favor.
No, you can't accept that position. You have to be straightforward. Whatever reflected, should report it or make a stance in that regard.
Without a doubt. Remember, auditors, and we'll see it again later, must be the I word. What is the I word? Starts with I.
Independent. Huh?
Absolutely. At all times. I don't care how much money the auditor is offered. I don't care how many trips to Waikiki that they are promised. I don't care how many girls in bikinis that they present to male auditors and guys with muscles to female auditors, whatever they do. Doesn't matter. The auditor's job is to look past all of that and say, I am sorry. I cannot do it. I must report to the shareholders what the position is and all the other stakeholders in this bloody company, not the least of which are home employees. So remember, a lot of people get hurt when companies fail or suffer. That's the problem. Right? And there's some senior management people out there who still don't get it because they're so bloody greedy. See, greed. Greed. When they sit on top of the heap and they see all those millions flowing through, they just decide that they have to get some for themselves no matter what. And sometimes they even drag auditors into the mess. I hope those auditors are few and far between. Because remember, audit means what? An independent hearing. A hearing that is not subject to any coercion by anyone. And if the world and the government and employees and shareholders and banks who lend millions and billions of dollars to companies cannot rely on the auditor's word, then we are doomed. Dog eat our lunch. By my money. Sounds like an epistle, but that's actually what is required. So when you would have done this class and passed your exam and moved on and all that stuff, to use some of this stuff wherever, or if you're confronted with some of these principles, you don't have to be an auditor to be confronted with some of these issues. You can be confronted in your normal day-to-day work. Even as an employee, this information is supposed to help you to understand what auditors are looking for and therefore help you to make decisions to do those things that are correct, to try and minimize errors, to avoid fraud at all costs. And if you see anybody engaging in it, you're to act like an auditor and do what? And do what? No answer. Nobody wants to pimp off anybody. Should you pimp off if you see somebody committing fraud or embezzlement in the company? Should you tell as an employee, co-worker?
Yes.
I know it's not an easy question to answer. On paper, the answer is simple. It's yes. But a lot of things in life don't happen on paper, does it? And so now you guys have a dilemma, even though you're not auditors. So now you can see the dilemma that auditors face in terms of being independent and trying to avoid being bribed or sidestepped by senior management. Okay? It is not an uncommon thing, especially the auditors uncover serious, serious stuff. And you guys may not be aware of all the serious, serious stuff that could occur yet, but mark my word, there's a lot of it going on. All right, so we have the background and the history and the requirements and the governance requirements for the auditor. So now we can go into the audit plan. How does the auditor go about planning his audit so that he can have the assurance under auditing and assurance standards that everything in the financial statements have been done correct, so that the auditor at the end of the day can provide a true and fair view. All right. Notice our discussion opens with a little definition from the Auditing Assurance Standard AAS1. Says the auditor should plan his work so that he can conduct a what? Effective audit in an efficient and timely manner. In other words, the auditor can't come there and act like he has to ever to be there. Some might act that way because the longer they have more money they make. That in itself is unethical. That's my point. Because like other professionals who work by the hour and all this stuff, they tend to fan around so the hours can keep piling up and they're not necessarily always working. So you don't want the auditor sitting around too long because when the longer they sit, the more money you have much to pay. And auditors, by their very requirement, has to be efficient and get things done in a timely manner. They can't go in organizations and sit around. Of course, these plans should be based on the auditor's knowledge of the client's business and covers a couple of things. Anybody in this group has ever been questioned by an auditor? Anybody? You guys have never been a part of an audit?
I haven't been questioned, but I've seen them for months and months
Yeah,
around
you've
the
seen them
office.
for months and months, fanning around uh, for some reason or the other. And I'll tell you, I'm glad you mentioned that because months and months usually mean there's an issue somewhere. Because auditors shouldn't have to be hanging around months and months. See my point? Either something is wrong somewhere. The auditors are inefficient in doing their work, or they're hanging around on purpose to get more pay. I hope that's not the reason, God forbid. Or the organization is in such a, I don't want to use any bad words, but the organization requires them to be around longer than they need to be. So that's an important point. If you see them hanging around for months and months and months, I'm not saying that was not necessary. But chances are too many months could mean some things really, really needed to be done that were not done, were not in place, and all this kind of stuff. So the auditors are in a panic now. They can't do their normal, typical audit, but now they have to dig into everything. And the more that they dig, the more they find, and the more they dig, and that kind of thing. And that kind of stuff can really extend an audit and create frustration for staff as well, by the way, because people don't like auditors walking around them every day while they do their work, watching now while the auditors do their work. Okay, but at the end of the day, and it's interesting, none of them never questioned you. Lucky you,
No, our internal persons, required certain information, and I provided it, so I was
right?
never questioned.
Interesting indeed. Interesting indeed. Because typically, maybe perhaps your area was not an area that was a concern for the auditors, and therefore they didn't have any need to talk to you directly. But oftentimes, the audit plan has to do with talking with strategic people and other persons in the organization. And the reason why I said other persons, because You can't just talk to the managers and supervisors if you're a good auditor, because sometimes the managers and supervisors are not the only ones with information, correct? Sometimes the what we call regular employee has more information than the auditor could dream of. And what they should probably do is have a little chit chat with them every now and then, rather than keep going to the manager. Because sometimes staff have interesting things to say that might help the auditor with the audit plan. So, what kinds of things the auditor should be considering for the plan? First of all, get information how the client's accounting system works. The auditor needs to know that, and whether or not there are any internal controls in place. If the auditor asks for internal control procedures and we say we ain't got none, that's trouble. You're gonna have the auditor there longer than they need to be there. Because no controls mean internally means that whatever buck up goes in that organization, and that always worries an auditor. Should worry the organization as well.
Mr. Wilkinson, you're saying that before the auditor actually comes into the organization to conduct the audit, he should acquire certain information prior to?
They
So you're
do.
saying that when he comes in, yeah, so it should be something pre-planned and then you go in and just start to conduct your audit.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The planning starts at good question. The planning starts at the audit firm, and even before they get in, they require certain information from the company, and they use that information to help with the plan. And then once the plan is ready to go, they move in with their team and execute the plan. We need to see this, we need to see that, we need to see the other thing, we need to see the other thing, we need to talk to this person, that person, because all of that is already outlined in the plan. Okay, that's the whole idea. They don't just walk in and say, "We'll see what happens when we get there." Well, that's part of it too, but that has nothing to do with the plan itself. It's very important they do that. Okay. Uh, the concern about can we rely on the internal controls? Are they effective? Or do we have three people signing or just one and nobody? Uh, do we have the separation of duties or one person is doing everything? Whatever those controls are, the auditors are going to be looking at them because if they're weak, they're going to be looking longer and stronger at the organization. If they're strong, they spend less time because they may rely more on the internal controls of the organization if they're there. Okay. How long the audits will be conducted, how long they take on procedures, all of that is planned by the auditor before coming in. Coordinating the staff, the audit staff is very important because they usually come in like with a marine team, a very short, small group of auditors who come in to do their thing. And so they have to be very efficient and they have to, the resources of the auditors have to be allocated effectively throughout the organization to make sure that all the key areas with regards to the review of the financial statements are actually done. Okay? All of this is part of the plan. So the plan then talks about the scope and the conduct of the audit, how far we're going to go, how deep we're going to go, and again, how the scope and plan how, and conduct of the audit all have to do with that earlier thing we saw with talking to the organization, presenting information, seeing if there are any internal controls. Are they strong? Are they weak? Is there an internal auditor? Are they strong? Are they weak? All these things happen before the auditor comes in many instances. So they come in armed and dangerous if they're doing their job right. Okay? And the audit program is developed before they get in. Now they may have to make some changes once they get in because reality on the ground is sometimes different from the information that you got to set your plan. But that's okay. Plans should always be open to adjustment. But the one thing you don't want to do if you're an auditor or other people is fail to plan. Okay? That's the key. So, what are the objectives of the audit plan? Well, there are a whole lot of things going on. We are told that if the audit plan is sufficient or adequate, that certain objectives should be met. I guess the opposite is true. If the plan is not adequate, certain audit objectives will not be met, and that's not a good thing. We want our auditors to come well and ready with their plan, and we want them to be able to change their plan um, when necessary in order to accommodate any new information so that they can conduct a proper and thorough audit of the organization. Okay? So, what presents an adequate audit plan? And again, these are the kinds of questions I might ask is, oh, can you give me 3 examples of what we consider to be adequate audit planning? And then you say, oh, I'm glad I studied that one. Okay. Now, remember, folks, I want you to give me a correct answer, but if you don't use the word for word exactly in your modules, I will not necessarily mark you down. You have to say something totally off. But if you put in your own words and it means kind of like the same that I'm looking for, then you will get credit. So some of the stuff you may remember verbatim, and others you may like, man, I don't remember each word, but that's okay. Come up with a sentence or a description or discussion that's as close as possible, and you never know. Okay? It doesn't have to be exactly as in your notes, but if you can do that, fine. Some people can do that. They have photographic memories, and the rest, some of us like photographic what? Are you kidding me? All right. So how's the audit adequate? Look at the important areas of the organization, seek out potential problems and find them quickly. Make sure the work is completed what? Expeditiously. What does that mean?
As soon as possible.
Sorry, what does it mean?
As soon as possible.
Yes. Thank you very much. As soon as possible. And depending on what boss you have in your organization, quickly. And then the other boss, hurry up. And then the other boss, like rapido, expeditiously. Properly utilize audit assistance. So some audit firms come in without a plan that's set up properly. They don't coordinate their junior auditors, especially if some of them are new, just out of university, just passing their CPA. And so they are rookies. And if you don't monitor rookies and make sure they're doing the job properly, then you have to end up duplicating it. Rookies can sometimes make mistakes that can hurt the organization in terms of the information that they gather and all this kind of stuff. So the auditors coming in are not perfect, but they're expected to have an audit plan so that they can plan ahead of coming in for these kinds of things. Okay. And of course, coordination of the work that is done with any other auditors, because sometimes auditors have to work with the previous auditors who were there, get information from them, get feedback, and other professional experts who may have to give an opinion for the auditor to rely on. So these are the things that makes an audit plan adequate. Okay, 5 of them. These are the key ones. And any auditor worth his grits should recognize these things and be seeking to do this. The other thing that's interesting, you'll see in your note is that auditors must, in addition to those 5 things for adequate audit planning, must consider the what we call the complexity of the audit. What does complexity mean?
That's the difficulty of it.
Yeah, the difficulty
The
of it.
scope. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just like doing surgery. Some surgeries, doctors will go in and cruise through, have a martini while they do the surgery. And then others, man, it's a big problem. For example, doing open heart surgery on an adult is very different from doing it on a child, correct?
Correct.
Why would it be more complex to do open heart surgery on a child? Anyone? Make a guess.
I think the child is more at risk. Body not matured.
Yeah, the child
know,
is still in
I
the
mean,
what?
that's my big of it.
Yeah, they're still in the
Still,
developmental stage. Absolutely. Trying to figure out how much anesthesiology is enough for the child versus the adult so you don't choke them to death. See? You don't give them so much that they don't wake up. These are all real issues. These have happened before. That's why they have been precise now, hopefully. We don't hear about too many deaths in that department. But these are real issues. The child's body is smaller, so you have a smaller space to what? Work with. And let's reduce the child to a baby. Imagine doing open heart surgery on a baby. How delicate that must be. So when we talk about complexity of the audit, I'm using that analogy so you can see But when the auditors come in, they too have their levels of complexity within the organization. Can we predetermine them? No. They arise as we move through the audit and come across issues that we have designed to audit and check and verify. Sometimes we don't really know as auditors the extent of issues until we, like the doctor said, I can't say until I open you up. And auditors are like that. They can't always understand the extent of the complexity until they come into contact with it within your organization. Okay? So they're looking at complexity issues. They're looking at the environment, what type of organization, what is the culture? Is this a culture where everybody acts like they don't care? Or is this a culture where people look disciplined? See, all of these things auditors are looking at. So auditors walking into a private sector company will feel very differently from the auditor general walking into a government department to conduct an audit. Because we know that government department people them are a little bit different from persons who work in the private sector in terms of their whole attitude towards everything. Can we change that?
I doubt it.
So far, the world has been unsuccessful. Notice I didn't say Bahamas, did I? The world. Because everywhere in the world, the government workers are the same, give or take, in case you didn't know. We like to say these Bahamians who wait for government, lazy, brave, and this and that. That's true. But they're not the only ones. Bureaucrats all over the world are like that, unfortunately. I don't know, it must be a disease like COVID that permeates all government workers. Ah, and then there's a lot of discussion going on between the auditor and the organization, and all that talk is really to help the auditor plan more effectively. The more they know about your organization, how people feel, what they think, how the accounting department is set up, how the internal audit department is set up, is there an internal audit department? Who's in charge of accounting? Is the person in charge of accounting qualified? Are the people in accounting trained to do the jobs that they do, and so on? And the list goes on and on and on. Is top management honest or not? Do they have a reputation for good practice, good governance or not? If they have a reputation for not having good governance, then the audit is spooked because now they're going into an environment where they know that senior management has a bad reputation for good governance. Interesting thing about this audit thing. I told you it's not just about professional auditors going in to do an audit, it's about you guys as employees and how you're affected through the organizations you work for. And a lot of this stuff you may not be dealing with now, and I'm sure you probably are, if you break it down a little bit. But later on, or somewhere in your professional life, you will be dealing with it either directly or indirectly. So one day, if you become the manager or something, the supervisor, something, auditors come in, they're going to talk to you. And then you're going to say, man, I'm glad I took that course because now I remember some of this stuff. And I'm glad I kept my notes because now I can go back and check a couple of things and see what's going on. All right. So on top of that, so far, there are some other factors. We talked about complexity of the audit. Okay, if it's a complex audit, the scope will be wider. They'll go deeper and deeper. If it's a simple audit, the scope will be very short. They won't go so deep in terms of the digging, etc. They'll rely on more persons giving information and that sort of thing. Again, this is just a judgment call that the auditors make as part of the planning and in auditing, like any other profession, we call it using our professional judgment. Can you learn that in school? No. What you do learn in school and in sessions like this are the academic principles of this thing called professionalism and having the stomach to determine certain things, the intuition. That comes with time, stress, and experience. Okay? All right, we talk about the environment in terms of the type of operation to be audited. Is there any computerization at all in the organization? All these things affect the audit. Remember, computers tend to take a lot of transactions out of people's hands and make it more difficult for manipulation. That's why we have computers as well. Because if things are being done through the computer, then people cannot manipulate numbers, they cannot manipulate processes. Once it gets to the computer, you cannot bribe the computer, can you? Not really. You could put in the wrong stuff and do some egg there, but theoretically, the computer helps to not only do things quickly, but also to minimize frauds and errors. And again, the auditor looks at all of this. If there's no computerization, that's another problem. Everything is manual, so everything's going to take the auditor longer to do. If the computerization is extensive, then the auditor can get things quickly and check things quickly to the computer system and get out of the organization quicker. Previous experience, if the audit has been there before, that will help because it will not be their first time, which means they should get out sooner. If they've been there 2 or 3 times and still not getting out sooner, management should be smart enough to try and find out why. John, why aren't you getting out sooner? This is your 4th rodeo. Sometimes auditors hang around too so they can get more money, which is unethical. But what can I say? It's everywhere. So we all have to be responsible for our ethics. Very important to know, have knowledge of the client's business, for sure. The more information you have about the client's business, the better you can make judgments about what you need to do, the better you can assess the accounting policies and procedures in the organization and all this stuff. The better they are, the better your audit will be, the sooner you get out as an auditor. Talk to your client, talk to your client. Discussion with the client is key. Discussion with staff is key. The more information you get from the relevant person, it'll increase your efficiency because you don't spend a lot of time trying to figure things out as an auditor on your own. And again, all of this is part of the audit plan and program. And all of this activity and information is designed for the auditor to establish a program, preferably to some extent ahead of time. So when they come in, they don't have to do too many startups in the organization. They know what they're going to do. They know what they're looking for. Essentially, they know the steps they're going to take. They know who's going to do what, when, and where during that audit. This is what audit planning is all about. Okay. Same kind of planning we should do in our lives. Are there any planners in this group? Generally, no planners. Everybody just do things off the cuff. Okay. Well, if you are one of those who do things off the cuff, I can assure you, you are not alone. And one of the reasons why people do things off the cuff is because planning takes time. And most of us say we don't have time. We don't want to make time. We don't want to take the time to mess with no stinky planning when we could use that time to do other non-planning things. So if you're a non-planner, you're not alone. The auditor, though, shouldn't do that. If they try it, it's going to cost your organization money because they're going to be inefficient in getting the job done. They're going to be there longer messing around because they have no plan. And you've heard the expression, when you're dating a guy and he doesn't look like he's going anywhere, what's the first thing you say? Jonathan, do you have a plan for us? You say you want to get married? What's your plan? And Jonathan, plan? What is the plan? When you hear that, what should you do?
Send them skipping, sailing.
Generally, yes, but it depends on what kind of Jonathan you have. Because the fact that he may not know means he could be what? Trained. All you have to do is tell him and then help him with it. And then he might turn out to be a better planner than you. But there's a certain risk involved that may not work out that way. So you now are at risk in terms of the kinds of complexity that you're going to be faced with in trying to get Jonathan to become a planner. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now you can see the kind of dilemma that auditors can have and everybody else getting things done. Same principle, same principle. But generally, the more you plan something, doesn't guarantee success. Doesn't guarantee that you won't have any pain and suffering. But it does generally make life a little easier, no matter what the outcome is. That's the beauty of it all. My wife is not a planner unless it's something specific, but generally, And she's not a planner not because she can't be taught to plan. She's not a planner because whenever she doesn't plan and things go wrong, what do you think happens? Anyone? Are any of you ladies bold enough to answer that one?
No. We're not.
No,
I know, because not the guys are not the only ones who don't plan. So sometimes our girls don't plan out and things just go to hell. Now you have to find somebody to fix it. All right. Luckily, some of us have somebody to fix it. All right. Shamik, are you there yet? No answer from Shamik yet. Ronaldo, are you in yet? Okay, he's on the way. All right, here we go. Notice where the auditor can get information from. Why not? The annual report to the shareholders, because that is supposed to tell the shareholders the truth. And that report is done by senior management, and they're not supposed to lie in that report. So they want to go to that annual report to the shareholders because the owners of the company are the shareholders. The senior manager is responsible for running the company for the shareholders. And so that annual report by senior management to the shareholders should contain the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Do you think that's true all the time? Is it always
not
true?
necessarily.
No, not necessarily. Remember, we can use fancy words to lie too. How about that? So have a nice clean shareholders report in color, technicolor, the best technology, the best paper in the world covering it, all kinds of proper, neat, beautiful layouts. But the question is, what's inside? What's inside? It's like seeing a beautiful girl, a handsome guy, we say. And we say, wow, at the beginning. And then you start to see some funny things happen. And you say, kiss my foot. I wonder what's inside. Kind of like that. All right. So the annual report to shareholders is a great source of information for auditors, minutes of the meetings of shareholders and boards and so on, committees. Beautiful information. Auditors always want to look for that. These are the kinds of questions I ask because these are crucial to the audit. Any auditor who's not checking this stuff is not worth this. See, okay. Internal financial information, internal management reports, budgets, all that stuff. Man, that's an auditor's dream if they can get that stuff. Previous year's audit working papers and other stuff related to the previous year. If they're not the auditors from the previous year, somebody was there before. Invaluable information. Okay. Personnel. And talking to people, get information. You never know what they'll say that could impact your audit. Somebody might be so vexed, they tell the auditor point blank, I could tell you just what even in here. All you have to do is ask me. See that? Now, if the auditor didn't talk to that person, they'd never know. But hopefully that's not too common in occurrence. But history and the records show that it is more common than we like it to be. All right. Again, discussions with your client, the policies and procedures manual tells the auditor that you have structure as opposed to not having them. Looking at publications about the reputation of your client, magazines, whatever information. Auditors do all this stuff before they come in and during the audit to check you out. They don't just walk in blindly, or certainly they shouldn't just walk in blindly. The more of this information they get from all these sources, the better. And then, of course, number 11, visit the premises and the plants if it's a manufacturing or merchandising company. Of course, remember you're auditing financial statements. So if your company, if the company says we have $10 billion in equipment, well, of course, the auditor can't just say, yay, that's a great big fat juicy set of assets and leave it at that. The auditor must do the next best thing. Please provide me with the documentation where you purchased them. See that? Now nobody wants to have that discussion. Then the auditor will say, after I get the documentation, I need to take the documentation and do a spot check of this $10 billion in equipment to make sure that they actually exist. Where are they? Well, we have some outside, and then there's some in the Bahamas, further down in the Caribbean, some in North Korea, and whatever. All of a sudden, you have a big old problem on your hands when it's time to inspect them. And some senior management people actually try to get auditors to avoid doing it. Like, come on, Tom, you don't really have to look at them. We say that they're there. Don't you have the source documents in your hand where we bought them? And any auditor worth its brain will say, yes, thank you very much, Mr. Jones. I do have the source documents where you pertain to have purchased them. However, part of my job, which we'll be talking about in this class later on, is called verification. So I hear you. I see your documentation, but I still need to verify for myself. Wow. What about if changes in management come up? You're going to do an audit, and the management saying 3 CEOs in 1 year, 3 legal counsels gone in 1 year. That's not good. The organizational structure is not solid. There's no structure. The reporting relationships are weak, inadequate, and so on. These things create problems for auditors. Okay? Are there any government legislations and laws which affect your client? And if they do, are they compliant? So if you run a doggone nuclear plant, are you following all the protocols for running a nuclear plant as part of the audit? The auditor has to go in and make sure that you're following those protocols. Because if you're not, that can create a great tragedy for the organization and many other people. So this thing about auditing is not just sitting down and looking at some numbers in a general ledger. Trust me on that. If any auditor is just doing that, you are being shortchanged and they're not doing the job. All right. The other things that auditors look for are contingencies. Anybody ever heard that word, contingency? What is a contingency?
I would say plan just in case.
Yeah, contingency is
Backup
something
plan.
that, yeah, a contingency is something that might happen, right? It may not happen. If it happens, you should have a plan to deal with it as an auditor or anybody. And if it doesn't happen, well, great. Thank God it didn't happen. Or, my God, I wanted it to happen and it didn't. So basically, a contingent is something waiting to happen. And it doesn't always have to be an accident waiting to happen. It could be something good as well. Okay? Like waiting for a rich spouse. How's that? What is that contingent on, anyone? Waiting for a rich spouse. What is that contingent on? Nobody knows? Okay. I know that's another tricky question. And you may wonder, well, why is Mr. Wilkinson keep throwing on tricky questions? Well, because I want you to see that auditing is not just the academic side and not just the pure coming in to check financial statement numbers. Auditing has words that apply to our own personal lives too, that can help us audit ourselves. How about that? True or false?
True.
Absolutely. All right. And then, of course, the other thing auditors look for are related parties, persons. Are there any subsidiary companies? Is the company doing any business with anybody else that is not reported in the books or not indicated anywhere in the annual report? Is the company dealing with any terrorists, potentially buying weapons, selling dope, whatever it is? Because some companies run a normal business to the front, and then if you go in the back, like many Chinese, Indians, and other African and others around the world, when you go in the back, you see they're doing something completely different. Okay? So the auditor needs to try and find out, okay, for sure. So the audit thing requires a whole lot of stuff. Now, does that mean that they sit down and go through a whole long laundry list? Not necessarily. There are some laundry items, especially if they're dealing with what, rookie auditors. With rookie auditors, they have to prepare a program, tick the box, do this first, do that second, do this third. If you find anything that's inconsistent with it, let us know. Until they get familiar. And even then, there's still certain things you should still tick, no matter how experienced you become, to make sure you check them. Don't leave it to chance. That all of this is part of the audit plan. And then just when you think the auditor is done digging and checking to come up with a plan, you have to then look at the terms of the engagement. what is the engagement letter saying? How long will the auditors be there? How deep will the auditors go into the business? How much will the auditors be paid? What are the auditors expected to do if they find any frauds and errors, and so on. Okay? Very, very serious stuff. Lots of little bits and pieces. Are there any legal? Again, we said that, and statutory requirements by law. And if there are, is the company following them? What accounting policies are the company using? Are the people trained in order to use the proper accounting concepts? Because if they're not using them, they're going to come. There's going to be a problem. Financial information is going to be incorrect, and that's a nice word for saying a total wreck in some cases. Okay? Any new accounting and auditing pronouncements, auditors need to know to see and check the company, see if the company is doing it. Because sometimes company financial controllers, CFOs, and chief financial officers and all this stuff, they don't keep abreast of certain things. And so they may not be aware of any new accounting and auditing changes that could impact their company until the auditors come in. And so the auditors do come in and see if the company is actually using any of the new pronouncements from the year before, 2 years before. Are there any significant areas that need to be audited, specialty areas that needs to be audited particularly? Does the audit plan have to include any unique kinds of information checks and so on because of the nature of the business? Certainly, we're going to audit a nuclear reactor plant. You're not going to go there in the same excitement as, say, Disney World. Okay? And so all of these things have to be taken into account by the auditor. Setting materiality levels. What the heck does that mean? Remember, we said materiality doesn't necessarily have to do with the amount of money, but rather would a particular action, putting it in or taking it out or leaving it out, cause the investor to act differently by doing that. In other words, if you had put in that the company has a contingent liability of 50 billion, it's very important for you to put that in. Shareholders need to know that. If you leave that out, then okay, that's a big problem. In that case, it's 50 billion. However, it could be 5,000. $5,000 is not a lot of money, but if leaving it out will cause an investor or a user of the financial statement to make a different decision than they would have made if it was reported properly, then even the 5,000 becomes a material amount of issue. Okay? That's how materiality works. It's all about the context, not necessarily the amount of money, even though the amount is sometimes come into play. Right? Interestingly enough, the audit plan must also include certain things like what represents a material error or not, what represents fraud, and so on. And by planning in this kind of fashion, they end up doing this thing called vouching, which we'll talk about later. Okay? And you'll see that vouching is really about checking the what we call the authenticity. What does that word mean? Authenticity. What does that mean?
Realness, the genuineness.
Yeah, the realness or the genuineness. Thank you very much. All right. So somebody, if you're passing some people in the office and they say that they don't feel that you're authentic, that's not a compliment. All right. But that's what the auditors have to do when they go out. What is authentic and what is false? What is material and what is real, and what are they trying to get by on us, thinking that as auditors we can't catch everything and they're getting away with something, right? Kind of thing. All right, but vouching is all about checking things back to see if it's authentic, if it's true. If if the general ledger has $35 million cash, you should be able to go to your bank account and find $35 million somewhere. God forbid if it has 35 million in the general ledger, then you go to the bank account and can't find anywhere near 35 million. What does that tell you as an auditor or anybody else? That something is terribly wrong. That the company is showing $35 million on its books, but there's no, the money is not in the bank. And if it's not in the bank, the question is, where the hell is it? Okay. All right. We'll get into the voucher discussion later on, but this is just kind of throw in. Anybody ever work with a voucher? Anybody knows what a voucher is? No?
See what a voucher is, or have we
Yeah,
ever worked with one?
yeah. What is, first of all, what is a voucher? I don't mind if you Google it. I want you to Google it. What is a voucher? Anybody found it yet? Voucher?
I guess it's a piece of paper kind of to record transactions or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. A voucher is a kind of document. Anybody ever work in a company where there's a prepare an entry for that? Like a financial institution or elsewhere, somebody says, prepare an entry for me to sign so we could process it. For that, prepare a debit for me. Prepare credit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a form of voucher. Piece of paper with information on it that carries out specific functions. Okay. However, voucher and vouching are not the same. For the moment, the voucher is that piece of paper. Notice things that the auditor is looking for when they're looking at a voucher, any kind of voucher, any kind of piece of paper that the company uses to do business. See, any kind of piece of paper that the company uses to do business. Even toilet paper is a voucher, depending on what's on it. How about that? Okay. So what is the auditor looking for? The date of the voucher to make sure it falls within the accounting period. What do you think that means? The date of the voucher to make sure it falls within the accounting period. Well, what do we consider an accounting period? Anyone? Let me see if you know.
It's 1 year,
Yeah,
as at
yeah,
1 year period.
absolutely. 1 year is considered the normal accounting period. So if you have a voucher being audited for 2020 and the date says 2021, can the auditor use that voucher for 2020?
No, but that's out of the accounting period.
Absolutely. But that doesn't mean somebody will try to slip it in to account for some issue that may have gone astray, or so that they get their I guess slackness maybe, or failure to keep proper accounting and control of the documents, whatever the reason. Folks come up with all kinds of interesting things when they're trying to pull things off. But nevertheless, the auditor wants to make sure that the voucher falls within the accounting period. That's the key. If it doesn't, then it cannot be part of that audit. It has to be part of that year. Okay? Notice that the voucher is made out in the name of the who?
Client.
Yeah, and the proper client too, not your own company that you set up on the side. Some guy was discovered. He was working for whom? I think Netflix. He was a IT executive, and during his time with Netflix, even though he was doing some great stuff with Netflix, so that we could all watch TV through the pandemic and all that. Even though he was doing that, on the other hand, he had his own consultancy company, and he was interacting with Netflix clients and doing his own business. Clearly, that is a conflict of interest and unethical by every stretch of the imagination. And he made a lot of money doing that. Something like $500,000 or more doing that until he was discovered. And what do you think Netflix did? Did they slap him on the back and say, "We're sorry that you couldn't hold yourself, John, but you've been a great employee, so we're keeping you"? Did they do that? No, they didn't. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't have. Many companies have people who do crooked, unethical things and still keep them because they bite, or their girl, or their family member, or whatever it is. However, when these things are happening, when auditors come across those happening things, they have to say something. They're often told not to say something, but if they're doing their jobs right, they have to. Then the voucher has to be authorized. It should be at least 2 signatures or more. The voucher has to have all the information on it, the date, the payer, who is paying to, the signature on it, the words and numbers, all that stuff is what the voucher is all about. The account number, when necessary, should be on the voucher. If you're posting it to cash, that number should be on cash. And the auditor is always looking for these kinds of things. Okay, it's called the verification process for authenticity, because everything you see is not what you think it is, especially when it comes to the audit process, and even sometimes in your own jobs, depending on what you do. What you think you see is not necessarily what you think you see. All right. Okay. So I think I've chatted long enough for the moment. Who read last week? Was it LaShawn?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think we
LaShawn.
all did.
Everybody's just, so we're back to the beginning again. But before I pick on LaShawn again, let me see if Ronaldo is in the room yet. Okie dokie. Well, LaShawn, it looks like we're back to you again.
Okay,
Okay, the audit program.
the
So,
audit,
sorry, all that stuff that I was yapping about was the audit plan. Now the audit plan is accompanied by what? The audit program. All right, let's go.
the audit program. An audit program should be set up for each audit. The audit program is a list of examination and verification steps to be applied to the audit process. An audit program consists of a series of verification procedures to be applied to the financial statements and accounts of a company. Accounts of a company obtain sufficient evidence to enable the auditor to express an informed opinion on the statements. For the purpose of program construction, the following points should be considered.
Okay.
1, stay with the scope and limitations of the assignment. Identify the best evidence for the audit process. Apply only those steps and procedures which are useful in accomplishing the verification purpose in the specific situation. Consider all possibilities for error.
Yes.
Coordinate the procedures to be applied.
What do you think coordinate means, anybody? Coordinate the procedures. What do you think that means?
Plan, put together.
Yeah, just like any other coordination. Like if you have 3 children, for example, do you coordinate anything? You're coordinating 24/7. In fact, you'll be coordinating for a minimum of 20 to 25 years, aren't you? Yeah, coordinating. Absolutely, it's the same thing. When auditors come in, they coordinate the procedures too. They have to get people together and determine what steps to take, how they're going to take them, who's going to do what and where, and then check them to make sure everything is going according to plan. Because you know what happens when you leave people the stuff and don't check. Okay? I tease my wife all the time. I said, "Aren't you tired coordinating stuff?" She says, "Yeah, well, and that's my mommy again. That's my sister, my cousin, my church people, my uh, all this coordinating stuff." And this me being the logical one. Um, we are considerably older now. Shouldn't you take a break from all the coordination that somebody else coordinating? She said, "Yes, but but somebody has to coordinate." See, like that. And so the coordinating goes on. All right, keep going. Auditors do it too. Keep going.
What is the best evidence for testing the accuracy of any assertion is a matter of expert knowledge and evidence. This is the primary task before the auditor when he draws up the audit program. Transactions vary in nature and impact. Procedures to be prescribed depend on prior knowledge of what evidence is reasonably available in respect of each transaction.
Mhm.
Advantages and disadvantages of an audit program. Advantages. It provides the assistant carrying out the audit with a total and clear set of instructions of the work to be done.
Now, before you go on, Nishan, let me just say this. Have any of you ever gone, like, for example, to a new job or a new department or something like this, and for some reason there doesn't seem any structure available for you to learn the new job that they ask you to do, and you constantly hunting around for somebody who will show you how it's done. Some people show you something, some people show you something else. Some people say just keep moving around, you'll get it. Some people give you a little bit of this and a little bit of that and all this kind of stuff. But you can't get any clear cut steps on how to do it. And if you ask, they say, what do you mean? Something to read. We don't have any written instructions on this. You just hang around and do what we say. And eventually you'll get it. Okay? The auditors cannot work that way. When they have people, young auditors or even seasoned auditors conducting an audit, they need to be clear, especially the rookies and newer auditors. They need to have their program, their procedures clearly outlined, even if it means ticking the box for each procedure to make sure that they do it and to make sure that they do it according to the firm standard. By all means. Okay, keep going.
Number two, it provides a total perspective of the work to be performed. The selection of assistants for the work on the basis of compatibility becomes easier when the work is rationally planned, defined, and segregated.
One more question again. Why is it important to uh, consider the compatibility of the assistant auditors? What does compatibility have to do with it? Shouldn't you be able to pick anyone to do any job?
No. They have to have a certain level of expertise or certain level of exposure and practicality towards what it is that they're doing.
Definitely. And they sometimes need to have a certain attitude as well to do certain work. Because some people can't sit too long messing around trying to focus. They lose focus after a while and then things get a little weird. Then other people love sitting around having coffee, they'll be focused all day. So again, compatibility is important. Depending on the job you have to do, you may have to pick certain assistants to do what? Focus on reviewing documentation and verifying and all that stuff. And then another type of assistant, you have to send them in the warehouse to do the audit. I mean, the inventory count. Why? Because they like moving around. They don't want to be stuck, even though their job is a stuck job. So all of a sudden, the auditor has to consider even the compatibility of the people working in the audit to get the best possible result. All right? Okay, keep going.
Without a written and predetermined program, there is always the danger of overlooking certain books and records. Under a properly framed program, the danger is significantly less and the audit can proceed systematically.
Yes. Now, folks,
By
what does systematically mean?
step by step.
Yes, as opposed to?
I guess without order, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, without order. Has anybody in this room ever been involved in anything that didn't have order?
Yeah.
Yes, it's an egg. All right. And those auditors who will be best at what they do will seek to have something systematic in place in their program. Those auditors who are not systematic, they'll be hanging around watching things up until like kingdom come and then send you a big bill and maybe still not do a proper audit. All right, keep going.
By putting their signature on programs, assistants accept responsibility for the work carried out by them, and when necessary, the work done may be traced back to the assistant.
So even assistant auditors try to take shortcuts. But if there's a program, they tick it off, they check it, they sign off. They can't say they don't know anything about that and they didn't do it. All right. So yeah, very important tool. Keep going.
The principal auditor can monitor the progress of the various audits by examining the audit programs.
Hmm?
The program serves as a guide for audits conducted in the succeeding year.
Yes.
A proper audit program serves as evidence in the event of any charge of negligence being brought against the auditor. It may be of considerable value in establishing that he exercised the reasonable skill and care that was expected of a professional auditor.
Now, this is where things get hairy, and this is why the program is so vital, and this is why it's the eighth, the last but not the least of all the advantages of a program, audit program. Okay. Uh, Clearly, I'm not going to necessarily ask you to list all eight of them. I mean, one never knows what an examiner will do, but you should be able to list some of them, if not all of them. So even if I say, for some reason, like I've had too much coffee, and I say, list all eight, then you say, man, who the hell could remember all eight? But I could remember five. See, like that. And then so you throw your five down and move on. That's what you do. Okay, it's called examination technique. So this thing about the audit program is also a backup for the auditor in case something goes wrong and the company decides to sue the auditors that they didn't conduct a true and proper audit, that because 6 months after they left, the company collapsed and they want to blame somebody. So they blame the auditor, sue them for a bunch of millions. The auditor can then use the program and say, really, Your Honor, if you want to bring a fellow auditor, independent auditor in, they can review our audit program and see that everything we done was done in accordance with generally accepted auditing principles, Your Honor. And if they can do that, it would be very hard for the other side to refute. If there's no program, you have nothing to show, dog eat your lunch, you're probably not going to win that case. All right. So those are the advantages of the program. What are the disadvantages, LaShawn? Let's go.
Disadvantages. The work may become mechanical and parts of the program may be carried out without any understanding of how said parts relate to the whole audit scheme.
Very common, yes.
Audit programs could be rigid and inflexible, often not changing even when aspects of the business, staff, and internal controls change.
Yes.
Audit programs may kill the initiative of efficient and enterprising assistants.
In other words, those assistants who want to think out of the box, the program is already pre-written. All you have to do is tick the box, said that they did it, they checked it, they called it, they verified it, whatever, and then initial to say that they've done that set of work for that day. And then the next day they pick up the next program form or electronic information and they did do the same thing again. So after a while, for many persons, it could become very routine and they start thinking, you know what, this is so boring, this is killing me. I have to get out of here, find another job where something is happening with it, blowing up the building or something. So yeah, so those are some of the disadvantages, unfortunately. However, if you've been looking, you'll see that the advantages of audit programs clearly outweigh the disadvantages. All right, keep going.
All these disadvantages may be eliminated by imaginative supervision of the work carried out by assistants. Assistants should be encouraged to be objective, report significant matters to the audit supervisor, even if they contradict the program.
Indeed. Uh, Unfortunately, those audit programs that are predetermined and given to the assistant auditors to use, a lot of times they have questions about certain things. They're afraid to present it to their audit supervisor or manager because sometimes they get browbeaten actually, like whatever, you're not supposed to think, just do it, and we'll do the thinking. And then after a while, people start get upset with that because they want to be involved in the thinking too, so to speak. All right. But still, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. All right. Keep going, Lashan.
Audit working papers. The audit working papers constitute the link between the auditor's report and the client's records. Documentation is one of the basic principles listed in AAS1. That's how you pronounce it, right?
Yeah, or yeah, AA or AAS1, either one.
All right. According to,
Actually, AA is the first time I've heard it. That's cool.
okay,
AAS1. Most people just say AAS1, but yeah.
I'll say AAS.
Sorry?
I will continue with AAS.
You go with AAS?
Yeah.
Okay.
According to AAS3, documentation refers to working papers prepared or obtained by the auditor and retained by him in connection with the performance of his audit.
By the way, AAS means audit assurance statements. Okay, and these are papers that are written for auditors about how to conduct certain audits when they go into the organization, and they're designed to guide them in the audit process, pretty much like generally accepted accounting principles will guide the accountant in terms of how to apply accounting principles to the everyday accounting process. AS1 and generally accepted um, auditing principles also help to provide similar guidelines and audit assurance statements. Okay, keep going.
The purpose of an auditor's working papers is to record and demonstrate the audit work from one year to another. Therefore, working papers are essential for the following purposes: controlling current audit work, evidence of audit work performed, provides supporting documents and data, provides information about the business being audited. Working papers vary in nature, but the foundation of all working papers can be traced to the basic constitutional document like memorandum and articles of association, partnership deed, and trust deed.
Have you guys ever heard about any of those constitutional documents?
The memorandum and articles of association.
Yeah, where did you hear about that one?
I know it's necessary when a business is being established, but I don't know the details.
I know it's okay if you don't know the details. You're already way ahead of the game. Most of the people in the world don't know what you just said. How about that? In case you're wondering, like, I should know more. You already know a lot that it constitutes the constitutional documents for the establishment of a company. Okay, for sure. All right, so hang in there. That's what it's all about. We do these things. So yeah, it does provide the what we call the constitutional documents because every company requires memos and R's before it can be established. It's part of the setting up of the company process. And memos and R's give basic information about who the owners are and how the company will be run. And anything constitutional has to do basically with the building blocks or any particular entity. Okay? That's why if you keep falling down and messing things up, the old people will tell you if you ever had any grandparents that you ain't got no constitution. Never heard that? No?
No.
You poor babies. You all the time. You missed all the all the good stuff from the old grandparents. Ah, you guys have my condolences. What is okay? So, but yeah, the memos and ads are really those legal documents that you need in order to set up a company in the Bahamas or anywhere in the world for that matter. If you're setting up a partnership, you should set up a partnership deed. It's another document. If you're establishing a trust, you establish a trust deed. It's another document. These are all the documents that are required to legalize and to determine how these entities are going to be run and structured. Okay. So again, uh, auditors coming in, they need to look at these things because these things establish the building blocks of the organization. If it's a corporation, it must have members and arts, and the auditors want to look at those members and arts and see what decisions govern the function of the company and whether or not the company is adhering to certain requirements of the members and arts. For example, if a trust company is running a trust business, then its clients should have a trustee for every trust that they want to establish. If they can't, if they don't have a trustee, then there's no trust. And what the hell is that trustee doing? And so on. Auditor goes into audit the trust companies and says, okay, we need to see these 20 trustees. Then somebody comes back a week later and like, we only need to find two. Really? You only can find two constitutional deeds? What happened to the other 18? Well, we're not sure. They might know, they might just not want the auditor to see, or they might not know. Either way, you're going to have a problem as a trustee in trust company because the auditors are going to now say 2 out of 20. What is that percentage? That does not look good. All right. All right, keep going.
2, the contents of the minute books. The contents of the balance sheet and the profit and loss account. The letter of engagement.
Anybody ever heard about that? The letter of engagement? No.
I haven't.
Well, basically, before an auditor comes into your company to conduct an audit, you'll sit down and say, we'd like you to be our auditors. The board has approved you as the auditor for the firm this year. However, we need you to prepare a document saying that what it will cost us and how you will proceed to conduct the audit, etc. And that document will constitute the letter of engagement, formally hiring the auditing firm to do the audit for this year. Okay? So in case you hear it again, now you can say with a smirk on your face, you thought I didn't know what the hell you were saying, but I happen to know now. That's what learning is all about. I know now what the letter of engagement is, and as a matter of fact, out of curiosity, I'd like to see it. And then they look at you funny and ask you for what? You only are. And furthermore, what happened to her? Well, she wants to see it. All right, keep going.
Importance of audit working papers. They provide guidance to the audit staff with regards to checking the schedules. The auditor can assign responsibility to the staff member who signs each schedule checked by him. They act as evidence in court when a charge of negligence is brought against the auditor. They represent the planning process for the auditor so that he can estimate the time that may be required for checking the schedules. The auditor should adopt reasonable procedures for custody and confidentiality of his working papers and should retain them for a period of time sufficient to meet the needs of his practice and satisfy any pertinent legal or professional requirements for record retention.
Thank you very much, LaShawn. You can take a breather. I'm hoping that Ronaldo will show up to give both of you a break. So you'll see. Shamik, are you there yet? The thing about virtual is that folks can be there and you don't know. And I'm like, I'm not answering because I don't want anybody to know I'm here. All right. Thank you very much, LaShawn. That was fantastic. Okay, Araminta, you up. Factors that determine the form and contents of audit working papers.
Working papers should record the plan, nature, timing, and extent of auditing procedures performed, and the conclusions drawn from the evidence obtained. The form and content of working papers are affected by the following. 1. Nature of the engagement. 2. Form of the auditor's report. 3. Nature and complexity of the client's business. 4. Nature and condition of the client's records and the degree of reliance on internal controls. 5. The need for direction, supervision, and review of work performed by assistants. Working papers should be designed and properly organized to meet the circumstances of each audit and the auditor's needs in respect thereof. The standardization of working papers, for example, checklists, specimen letters, standard organization of working papers, improves the efficiency with which they are prepared and reviewed. It also facilitates the delegation of work while providing a means to control its quality. Working papers should be sufficiently complete and detailed for an auditor to obtain an overall understanding of the audit. The extent of the documentation is a matter of professional judgment, since it is neither necessary nor practical that every observation, consideration, or conclusion is documented by the auditor in his working papers.
Now stick a pin in our mouth and let me just say something here just for the record. So you can
Yes,
see
sir.
these working papers are optional. There's no legal requirement that the auditors produce these working papers, but it is always in the auditor's interest to have working papers to prove and to check back what they're doing. And if there's any dispute in law or otherwise, they can pull out their papers and show we did what we were supposed to do. That's why they're so important. Now, what goes into the audit papers or the documentation of the audit work is up to each and every auditor or audit firm. It'll vary from firm to firm, and they will prepare these audit papers according to their own standards based on their own experiences. But they do provide valuable documentation. Okay. If any of you have ever worked in compliance, for example, you'll know, and if or when you may end up there, that if you work in compliance, if you don't have documentation, it didn't happen. Doesn't matter if you did it 1,000 times. You have to have it written down somewhere, preferably with a signature
Yes.
next to it. Absolutely. Otherwise, nobody will believe you, even though it's true. Okay. All right. Keep going. Permanent audit file.
A permit audit file normally includes 1, information concerning the legal and organizational structure of the entity. In the case of a company, this includes the memorandum and article of association. In the case of a statutory corporation, this includes the act and regulations under which the corporation functions.
By the way, in case you didn't know,
Sorry.
uh, a statutory corporation in the Bahamas is like a BC. What we mean by statutory corporation is that it is a corporation that is set up like a typical company, but it is owned by the government and governed by certain legal restrictions. Okay, so when you
It's
get
sued in
in,
its name, in other words.
yes, all right. So BC is a big time statutory corporation. Can you think of another company as a statutory corporation?
The commission, the Securities Commission.
Well, yeah, indeed. Yes,
In a sense, yeah.
yeah, in a sense, not as deep as BEC, but
The
yeah,
telco, waterworks,
yeah, but telco and
Public
water,
Hospital Authority.
yes, those doggone monsters. Yeah, absolutely. They are statutory corporations. So many of them, they are incorporated just like a real company. The only problem they have, they are owned by bureaucrats.
Yes.
Politicians, when I say owned by politicians, I don't mean they legally own them. I mean politicians run them and bureaucrats in them run them. And they run them any way they feel like, including run out, run down, run over, and whatever run they could think of. And then since it's public money going into it and all that stuff, so what? Taxpayers will pay and we'll just run it down again. How about that? All right. Because my thing is, remember, BEC for many decades was one of the prime employers in the Bahamas, paid more money to staff, some benefits, than even private sector people to some extent. BEC was a monopoly in the Bahamas, still is. They control most of the electricity services in the Bahamas. And so my question is, with all that going, why is BEC talking about they don't have any money? What did they do with it? Anyone knows? No.
I'll take a guess, but this is being recorded. So.
Absolutely. Take, take a wild guess in your head. I just want you to think about that. Well, we talking about where did the VAT money go? VAT just got here. Where did the BEC money go? Because they made tons and tons and tons of money And the
What about
sixth,
BTC, Mr. Wilkinson?
same thing we say
BTC
over
too.
there. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And those
Years
people,
and years and years.
yes, those people in BTC and BC is living high off the hall from the top right down to the doggone janitor. And anyway, now we act like we have amnesia. Nobody cares. That's the past. Shut up. That's the past. We need to move forward like it never happened. Where did all that money go? My. All right. And I wonder what the auditors had to say about it back in the day and the day after that, and not too long ago, and maybe even now. See, my. Were the auditors of those statutory corporations complicit in any way? Hmm. All right, keep going, Aaron Matthew. You're the one who brought it up. Keep going.
Number 2. Extracts or copies of important legal documents, agreements, and minutes relevant to the audit. 3. A record of the study and evaluation of the internal controls related to the accounting system. This might be in the form of narrative descriptions, questionnaires, or flowcharts, or some combination thereof. 4. Copies of audited financial statements for previous years. 5. Analysis of significant ratios and trends. 6. Copies of management letters issued by the auditor. 7. Record of communication with the retiring auditor, if any, before acceptance of the appointment as auditor.
Let me ask you something before she goes on. Go back to 6. Why would copies of management letters issued by the auditor be important? Remember when audits are done, before the auditors leave, they have an audit letter telling management what they found to be out of order and what they need to fix, and that they should try and fix them before the next audit.
Right.
And so that management letter to the by the auditors is very crucial. So when the auditors leave, management have the job of fixing those things. Some management people do it, others ignore it. When the auditors come back the next day, they meet the same old problem. And now the auditor has a dilemma. We left this with you last year. Why didn't you fix them? Why do you continue to operate in this chaotic way? Why don't you want to fix them? And that is a good question because some managers and senior management people don't want to fix things. Because fixing things will expose who? People who are up to?
No good.
Absolutely. Okay? And that has to cross even an auditor's mind or less of a mind. Okay? You don't have to be a rocket scientist, you just need to think outside of the box a little bit. All right, keep going.
7. Okay, that's 8. I was on 9. I think it would be 9. Significant audit observations from previous years.
So now these are all the things that are sitting in what file?
In what?
Which file?
The previous file?
Uh, well, we have a specific name at the top of the same exercise you're looking at. You roll back to the top. What's the heading for these 9 points?
Boy, I can't roll back.
Oh, you can't roll back? Let me roll back.
Working paper, working.
There.
Permanent
Yeah.
audit
The
file.
permanent audit file. Permanent audit file means that that is the file that the audit firm will keep indefinitely on your firm because it has those 9 things in them, including the constitutional documents. So those are not documents that they'll just get rid of. You follow? Those are all key documents, and so they go into a permanent file. Right? So one of my questions will be, what type of list 3 types of documents or information is kept in a permanent file? And so if you like overlook that, I'm not looking at that, then you miss 3 or 4 easy points, just like that. All right, so that's the permanent file for the auditor. The next file that the auditor keeps is the current audit file. Let's see what's in there. Keep going.
Okay, the current file normally includes correspondence relating to the acceptance of the annual appointment. 2, extracts of important matters in the minutes of board meetings and general meetings relative to the audit. 3, evidence of the planning of the audit and audit program. 4, analysis of transactions and balances. 5, a record of the nature, timing, and extent of auditing procedures performed and the results of such procedures. 6, evidence that the work performed by assistants was supervised and reviewed. 7, copies of communication with other auditors, experts, and other third parties. 8, letters of representation or confirmation reviewed from the client. 9, conclusions reached by the auditor concerning significant aspects of the audit, including the manner in which expectations and unusual matters, if any, disclosed by the auditor's procedures were resolved or treated. 10, copies of the financial information being reported on the related audit reports.
That's a lot of stuff for the current file. Notice,
Yes.
yeah, the permanent file contains mostly constitutional documents, and the current file contains what we call what? Operational documents. All these things, these 10 steps are all operational procedures to get things done. The permanent file tends to keep the constitutional or legal documents, like memos and odds and deeds and minutes and all that great stuff, so that if anybody wants to say who said, who didn't say, that permanent file will always be there. These operational documents, after a while, you can actually even discard them after maybe 3 years, but certainly the permanent file documents, audit firms will not want to get rid of them. They want to keep them on their permanent record. Okay? So make sure if I ask you to give me an example of some examples of a permanent, what goes into a permanent file, current file, you don't say, well, did we do that? It's a way to get some easy peasy points. All right, keep going.
Importance of custody of working papers. What are the auditor's rights where clients and other auditors seek access to their auditing papers?
Now, before you go on, let me just say that sometimes there's a big fight that goes on because sometimes the firm that is audited by the auditors sometimes wants to get their hand on the auditor's working papers to see how the auditors were thinking, so they could see how to plan some other God knows what when they go back to their offices within the firm. And sometimes other auditors want to seek information as well. And the question is, should the auditor disclose to the client or other auditors its working papers or not? All right? Because the working papers, remember, is like a love letter to the auditor, or your diary. Any of you guys have a diary? Who is somebody smiling?
Diaries of private business.
They are. You don't have to tell me what's in it. Just tell me if you have one.
Negative.
Nope, that's a no for me too.
Yeah, why don't you have one? Is it that you don't have time to write in it?
I mean, I wouldn't say that. Yeah, that's probably one of the main reasons why.
That's one reason. I can tell you why I don't have one. Because there's no way I'm writing about my personal stuff in no book. That any Tom, Dick, and Harry,
For your memoirs, Mr. Wilkinson, you don't have no memoirs, Mr.
well, that's a little different from a diary. Yeah, maybe I consider a memoir if I have enough
Yeah.
time before I leave this miserable place. But yeah, the memoir is a little different. Diary tends to go like sometimes memoirs too, but that memoir is a little more formal, talks about the nicer side of your lives, our lives. But that diary thing, man, that gets into and he hurt me so bad. I just felt like I wanted to slit his throat and cut him off and do shit like that. That's what the diary. That gets in trouble writing all that crazy stuff, even though it might be true. All right. So I don't blame you guys. Stay away from that diary nonsense. Whatever you don't remember, too bad. Whatever people don't get from you directly, too bad. Tell them remember. Because you're not putting any crap down in no book for them to find out after you get sick or old and die. It's, I didn't know the shine was like that. I just think I'd have never been a friend or what. All right, Aramantha, you're the one who brings cause these things to happen. Keep going.
Auditing and assurance standard states that the auditor should respect the confidentiality of information acquired in the course of his work and should not disclose any such information to a third party without specific authority or unless there is a legal or professional duty to disclose.
Wow, that is even good for non-auditors. If you work in an environment where confidentiality is key, a bank, a credit union, a hospital, anything where confidentiality is crucial, man, that is such a serious duty. And there are people out there, including auditors and other professionals, who still violate that principle of confidentiality. They can't wait to get out to tell somebody what they saw or heard that day about Tingham and Tingham them, whatever the case might be. And really, that kind of confidentiality should be maintained, all right, for obvious reasons. All right, keep going.
Auditing and Assurance Standard 3 states that working papers are the property of the auditor.
Mm,
The auditor may, at his discretion, make portions of or extracts from his working papers available to his client.
right.
AAS 3 further requires, in paragraph 14, inter alia, that the auditor should adopt reasonable procedures for custody and confidentiality of his working papers,
By the way, what does inter alia mean? Anybody know?
among other things.
Excellent. Doggone it. Man, if it wasn't, mm, that's perfect. Among other things, the legal term, lawyers love that bloody expression. Uh, inter alia. And but yes. And notice the auditors have a duty to protect their information. They do not have any legal requirement to disclose it unless there's a case and they're directed by the courts to do so, or the person, the client, the company whose information it belongs to, they provide authorization in writing. Okay? Other than that, there should be no chit chat about stuff. Oh well. Okay? All right, keep going.
2, an auditor in practice shall be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he disclosed information acquired in the course of his professional engagement to any person other than his client without the consent of his client, except when required by any law.
There you go.
3, requests for working papers may be made by the client or other auditors of the enterprise or its related enterprise, such as a parent company or subsidiary. 4, an auditor can rely on the work of another auditor without having any right of access to the audit working papers for the other auditor. For this purpose, the term auditor includes internal auditor.
Mhm.
5, the client does not have a right to access the working papers of the auditor. However, the auditor may, in his discretion, in cases considered appropriate by him, make portions of or extracts from his working papers available to the client.
That is a very deep statement because auditors and clients are oftentimes fighting about that. Like, you came to audit my firm, but I can't see what you did. The auditor said, well, these are my private working papers. I don't have, like a trustee, I don't have to show you my thoughts and processes and how I went about this audit. The only thing that's important to you is that I conducted the audit according to generally accepted auditing principles and I provided you an opinion that was favorable in this case. Why do you want to get into my deepest, darkest thoughts and secrets about what I did in my audit program in order to effect this audit? And then the CEO will say, well, this is my company. I'm entitled to anything you have with my company. And the auditor says, really? Prove it. He says, I'll sue you. He says, great, sue me. Or, please, please, please don't sue me. I'll show you what you need to know because I want you to call me back next year so I can make another 10 million. See my point? He shouldn't say that though. but crap happens all the time. All right, keep going.
Working papers, format, and features. As audit working papers are quite useful, they should be properly prepared. They should always have the following format. A, standard form. They should be prepared in a standard form. The subject matter should be arranged under various headings and subheadings. B, proper layout. There should be proper design and layout of the working papers. This creates uniformity in the maintenance of working papers. C, space margins. There should be enough space for margins for writing down the auditor's remarks and decisions.
Mhm.
D, proper organization and arrangement. The working papers should be meticulously organized and arranged. In other words, the working papers should be so organized and arranged that the auditor will be able to locate any particular matter easily.
Yes.
E, completeness. The audit working papers should be complete in all respects. They should contain detailed information on all essential facts or points.
Mhm.
F, clarity and accuracy. The working papers should be clear and self-explanatory. The information contained in the working papers should be accurate. G, good quality paper. Good quality paper should be used for working papers as they are subject to frequent handling.
Yes.
Ownership and custody of working papers. Working papers are the property of the auditor. The auditor may, at his discretion, make portions of or extracts from his working papers available to his client. Audit working papers are the property of the auditor, and he is entitled to retain them.
Full stop, period, and that's it. For anybody who still wants to get information from the auditor, but they're really not entitled to. The only person that can make them do that is the client in writing and the court of law. All right. So that's our story on the audit plan. As you can see, it's a rather elaborate one, but it's a very important one. And if it's done properly, uh, the auditors can do a very effective job. Okay. Any questions so far before we take the next 2 minutes to start our next module? Anything cross your mind? I know we pretty much beat that horse to death, actually.
I have a quick question, Mr. Wilkinson.
Yes,
In
excellent.
relation to the not so much the work, I mean the information shared. This was really thorough.
That's
But
fine.
in relation to the exam questions, are we allowed to bring materials in, or we just have to go based on our memory?
Yeah, the exam will not be open book, unfortunately.
That's a
You
lot
have,
of information.
yeah, I know, I know. I'll give
Okay.
you, yeah, I know what you mean. It is a lot. What I would like and encourage you to do is this. Try not like, first of all, I want you to read it, of course, so that you will know as we're doing and discussing the context uh, within this thing. And since we're doing this thing the way we're doing it, um, you wouldn't have a whole lot of reading like to reread. What I would encourage you at this point, because somewhere between the lectures and the reading, that's kind of why I do it that way, to accompany whatever reading you do on your own. Once you've done that reading thing for each module, I would say to you, go back and find the key things and pretty much staring you in the face and take all the what I call the convoluted details and just kind of break them down into simple points, short phrases, one or two sentences. And by when you're doing that, it will also help you to retain and remember information as part of your study. So where you see the objectives of the audit, the importance of the working papers, the advantages and disadvantages, the key is to take those headings and then whatever the information is under them, make it simple, break it down. And then after you've done, while you're doing all that, your brain is recording. And then while you do once you've done all that, then you just study your notes. You follow what I mean?
I got you, Mr. Robinson.
Yeah.
I just, there's like I said, it's a lot of information, and you want to get the best grade possible. So I just wanted to know how it works.
I know. Doggone it. That's how I felt when I went to do the Series 7 examination. They gave me this big old stinky manual with, I don't know, look like millions of pages in it. And it said, study that because you're going to be writing a 6-hour exam with no break unless you have to go to the restroom. And I'm like, are you people crazy to myself? But yeah, they were totally crazy. I only say that to say, yes, I know it's quite a bit of information. Um, for example, if I were to ask you to list 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages of the audit program, if you were to look at your notes, do you think that that's a question you'd be able to answer? Three
I mean,
advantages, 3 disadvantages.
yeah, that's a question I think would be expected. Just,
Yeah, yeah. Now
so it'd be
remember,
something, right?
yeah, remember everybody. That's the other thing. We all kind of remember crap differently. So what I encourage you to do, once you've done this reading and we've done our lecture and stuff, just create notes for the important topical issues that you know we've discussed. Just keep it simple after that. My questions to you are not going to be elaborate, and I don't want you to have to write like a long, doggone, big time, fat, stinky essay that you something have to write for a legal exam. No, it won't be like that. My questions are going to be short and crisp, asking you very specific things. So you just break down the details into short points that you can study and then study them. And you will find that you will be fine. Okay? But if you try to remember all those big globs, then that's not going to work, especially, some of us are not wired like that. Others, we read that crap and we remember that crap for some reason. I don't know why. So that's a good question. And therein lies the challenge for some of us anyway. I know that's not more comforting than before, is it?
That's fine. I mean, I just wanted to know, what was expected
Yeah,
because, you could break down a module into maybe a page or two if, you read and you just concise everything.
yes,
But if it is that you have to memorize, it's different. You would plan different for the
yeah,
exam.
yeah, yeah. If you can break down the stuff into pieces that you can like short pieces you can remember, that would be the way to go. Unless of course you're that person who just have a photographic memory, you read stuff and remember crap like that. If you're not that person, then I say take each page or whatever with the key points, simplify the key points, and then study the key points. That would be your approach. At least that is what I would recommend. Okay, for sure. Because I
Okay,
know
thank you.
you're quite welcome. That part of it is always a challenge. Okay? All right. So I'm just going to take a few moments to introduce you to the issue of internal controls, and then I'll let you run off to start breaking things down into controllable parts. I'm sorry, I'm just smiling at you guys because I'm happy I'm not you. Being a student is a nightmare, isn't it? I still remember my examinations. All right. Just because you asked that question, let me just say that in my lifetime, I've written 5,999 gazillion examinations, and I can't think of one of them that I was ever comfortable in. The only thing that brought me any comfort was when I wrote my final examination ever, was that bloody Series 7 a couple of years ago when everybody in there was young and they looked at me like, what is this old guy doing in here? Kind of thing. And I'm thinking, you know what? All right. So I know it stinks. Okay. So this thing about internal control, we saw that earlier. We said that internal controls uh, had to do with how the company operates on the inside, what steps the company takes to make sure that the assets of the company are properly protected, that the petty cash is locked up and nobody can run off with it, that we do spot checks on petty cash to catch people who might be sneaking it off and putting it back. These are all internal control issues. That the duties in the organizations are segregated. One person isn't doing too many things. That's never a good idea. That people have authorization to approve and sign off because one person making all decisions never a good idea. There should always be at least two or three eyes, and signatures, and all this kind of stuff. These things are what we call internal control issues. And the reason why auditors are so concerned about them is because when internal controls are weak, it leaves a lot of room for errors and frauds. And of course, that's never good. That can cost a company anything from its reputation to millions of dollars per year, unfortunately. So, this thing about internal controls is absolutely critical. Um, it's a very important area of auditing. Um, Generally, it refers, we're told, to the checks of what's going on how a business is run to make sure that it's efficient and working. It is also an important management tool, we're told. Right? It ensures that the various checks, cross-checking in the system are built in so that not one person is responsible in doing everything to fraud the company and run off into the bacon. These are all important reasons why the company has to make sure that its internal controls are strong. And of course, the bigger the company becomes, the more important internal controls become. Because now you have to put them in place all the way down the organization, all across subsidiaries inside and outside the jurisdiction, oftentimes in foreign countries with different cultures, and still somehow try to make these things work. Okay? Why do we have this internal control? So that people will not defraud the company, so that we can maintain the highest level of accuracy because by reducing errors or eliminating them, and also by doing this, it makes the accounting information much more reliable. And auditors love it when they walk into a company with strong internal controls. Okay? Very important. And last, of course, but not least, the internal controls, if they're good, help to safeguard assets. Does anybody know what an asset is in a company? What is an asset in the company? Ever heard that word, by the way? Asset. Anybody ever heard that word?
Yeah, I said.
Yeah, what does it mean? What is it?
What you own?
Yeah, that's it. An asset is everything a company owns. An asset is everything you own individually. Um, are our children assets?
Yes.
Not really. Because do we own them?
I would say, yeah, we own them until a certain age. Yeah.
Yeah, the law say till 18
No.
or 21 if
Or 41. Or,
Oh, no, no, no.
or flicking 63 or whatever. Depending on a household. Some people never leave home for some reason. Uh, yeah, that's an interesting question about whether or not children an asset. Based on accounting principles, we would not consider our children to be an asset because we don't own them. We think we own them. We act like we own them. We insist sometimes that we own them. Even after they grow up, we act like we own them. Because when parents are still bossing children around even after they turn 80 and all that, the parent is 93 and they still do what I do what I say, bossing them around. So, but in essence, we don't really own our children. They are just a gift. And oftentimes, so in accounting, we don't say that they're an asset, we say they're a gift because they're given to us for a while to nurture. And while we nurture them, we learn to love them and they become special. But in real practical sense, we don't own them. That's why when they grow up, sometimes it's so difficult for parents to let them go. But we have to. Otherwise, we're going to hurt them in many ways if we don't let them go. We still love them. We still want them to check on us and be respectful to us and all that, but we don't own them. They must now go off and do their own thing. How about
So what are parents in accounting terms?
you mean the parents are assets?
Yes.
No, parents are stewards. You know that word?
Almost like a trustee.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as you can see, when it comes to our children and our being parents, we tend to use the word own, asset, and own a little loosely. Neither owns the other. Our children are our gifts and our parents are our stewards. And that's a beautiful thing once you understand it. But a lot of us don't want to understand it. We just want to, like, I bring you in this world. I don't care how old you is, just do what I say. Shut up. Tell your husband, shut up too. See, like that. Before I don't tell him a piece of my. Ah, okay. That's funny. All right. And you thought it was just a regular auditing. It's nothing regular about this class. There's a lot of stuff in auditing that applies to our real personal life. That's the whole point. All right. And every now and then I'll just lay some of that on you for the record. All right. So Shan, why don't you just pick it up for the next few moments and then we'll break and then you can finish reading up on internal audit and go to the next module for next week's session. All right. Definition of internal control.
Definition of internal control. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants has defined internal control as the plan of management and all the coordinate methods and measures adopted within a business to safeguard its assets. To safeguard its assets, check the accuracy and the reliability of its accounting data, promote operational efficiency, and encourage adherence to prescribed managerial policies. A system of internal control extends beyond those matters which relate directly to the functions of the accounting and financial departments.
In other words, this is not just for accounting and finance. It goes further than that. Keep reading.
The Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales defines internal control as internal control means not only the internal check or internal audit, but the whole system of control, financial and otherwise, established by management in order to carry on the business of the company in an orderly manner, safeguard its assets, and secure as far as possible accuracy and reliability of its records.
So, for example, when it comes to HR, that's not accounting and finance, that's human resources. But human resources requires a certain amount of internal control too. Otherwise, people will be running rampant. People are running rampant in organizations doing whatever they feel like, even with controls in place. True or false?
True.
I sick. I dad sick. I sick again. Now my teeth sick. Now my mummy's sick. Now my tree churn sick again. We and sometimes it's true, and when it's true, it's okay. But oftentimes it's not true. And if you don't have controls in place to try and curtail even things of a non-financial and accounting nature, the organization is going to have a lot of problems, one way or the other. If you don't have a chain of command, if you don't encourage proper communication, if you don't encourage staff to respect each other and all this stuff, those are not financial issues. Those are not accounting issues, but they are internal control issues. And if you don't control them, they will control you. Okay? Remember the old people used to, I forget, don't know nothing with no old people. But in the old days, the old people used to say, if you play with a puppy, he will what?
Lick him out.
Yes, doggone, you know that one. Exactly. And organizations are no different. If you don't have internal controls in place to control what people do, it doesn't have to be financial and accounting, anything. They're gonna lick your mouth. They're gonna egg you right up as an organization and run roughshod over the system. And many people do that every day. Some do it formally by getting friendly with people so they could abuse the system, and some do it informally because they're not friendly with certain people and they're not don't have a good but they still do it. You get me mad if I come into work tomorrow and stuff like that. I'll stay home again. These are all internal control issues. All right, keep going.
Objectives of internal control: to minimize, if not eliminate, wastage and inefficiencies in business operations and to safeguard the assets of the business, to ensure a high degree of accuracy and reliability of accounting data and promote operational efficiency, to measure how well management policies are being implemented, to evaluate the efficiency of performances in all aspects of business activities, and to highlight the weaknesses. Forms of internal control. Various forms of internal control help in ensuring correct and reliable records of transactions and operational efficiencies. The following are some of the key controls. Accounting controls. Accounting controls ensure correct and reliable records of transactions in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles.
Now stick a pin for me, LaShawn, for a second. If I ask you a question, what are accounting controls, and give me a brief explanation. If you say to me, well, first of all, let me say, list three forms of internal control and give a brief explanation of one. If you say the first one is accounting controls and it's designed to ensure that the information is correct and reliable, that's a correct answer. I don't need you to write the rest of that paragraph for me because the rest of that paragraph is detail about that first sentence, that first key point. You follow what I'm saying to you? So I want you to know it because we're studying it. But for your exam, if I ask you to list it and give me a brief explanation, you don't have to try and remember that whole paragraph. Not really. All right. Just just a little hint, hint, hint. Keep going, Nishan. But that does not mean don't read the details, because the devil is in the details. Just that you wouldn't need all of it for your examination. Just the core stuff. Okay. All right. Keep going.
Okay. Such controls are primarily the plan of the organization. They represent the procedures and records that are concerned with and directly related to the safeguarding of assets and liabilities in the financial records. Accounting financial controls include budgetary controls, standard cost control, bank reconciliation, internal checks, and internal auditing. Accounting controls deal with the process of recording all transactions, safeguarding the asset, and adherence to prescribed managerial policies.
Now, you may not realize that in that little small space that you have said several mouthfuls about controls, okay? In particular, accounting controls. Notice, what do we consider to be accounting financial controls? Number one, budgets. A lot of people think budgeting is just saying, oh, that's just how much we can spend. No. When you budget, what are you trying to control, anyone? What are you controlling? When you set up a budget, what are you controlling?
How much you spend?
Absolutely. Just like your own personal budget at home. Those of you who don't have a budget, well, maybe you can remember everything in your head. If you're budgeting in your head, that's okay. As long as the budget is helping you to control your spending without some kind of budget or budgetary process, you could find yourself spending money that you didn't plan to spend. And when you add up what you didn't plan to spend, you have a nightmare at the end of the month or quarter, whatever it is, whether it's an individual or company. Okay? Budget is a very serious control. Bank reconciliation, why is that a control? Bank rec, why is that a control?
I guess the bank keep records of your transactions in a particular period in time,
That's part of the
give you an
question.
indication of what you would have said.
Yes, that's 50% of the answer. The other 50% is the bank keeps its records and you keep yours, don't you? Your general ledger,
Yes,
right? And what does the
yes,
what does the bank reconciliation do? It takes your records compared to the bank records, and at the end of the day, they should be the same, correct?
correct.
And if they're not, what does that tell you?
Something is definitely wrong.
So
But
if
who's
your
in, I can't say.
yeah, if your record shows you're supposed to have $50,000 in the bank, and you do your bank rec and the bank statement doesn't show 50,000, are you gonna just say, no problem?
No, I'm gonna go after the person whose money
You're
isn't
gonna
showing.
go after the bank. Like my account is showing 50,000, and you telling me my 50,000 ain't in this bank? You better before you start talking funny. That's why the bank rec is a control. Those companies that don't do bank recs, tellers and other people could steal from them, and you wouldn't know. And persons inside the organization can steal from the company, you wouldn't know because nobody's doing any bank recs to check. Did you know that? I know. If you don't actually deal with it, it really doesn't touch you directly, and therefore you don't really understand the seriousness of it. But people steal millions and thousands and millions of dollars all the time because of the absence of bank reconciliations. And people in the accounting department discover that they work for companies that don't do bank recs. They start stealing company money. Who's going to check to see where it's gone? If the bank realizes, or somebody in the bank, a teller or somebody, that no bank recs are being done for a particular company, then every week or month they just take out some money because nobody's checking. Who's going to know? Without a bank rec, you can't know for sure. All right. So these are very important control measures. I wouldn't talk about the internal auditing department. They're there to watch you guys every day. Internal audit department is more persistent than external because they're there every day, watching, checking, making sure that things are going according to the policy and procedures. And if you don't do, they write you up. And if you get too many writes up, they may write you out the door. How about that? Very serious control issues. But these are all necessary. Otherwise, people are going to always go ragged with things. Because remember, left alone, we do some funny stuff. We have to always be checked for some reason. Not all of us, but too many. All right, keep going. So those are the accounting controls. Then we have the
Administrative controls.
mhm,
The scope of this control is very wide and should also include accounting controls. Such controls are concerned mainly with operational efficiencies. In short, they may include anything from organizational procedures, record keeping, distribution of authority, and the decision-making process. They also include controls such as time and motion studies, quality control through inspection, statistical analysis, and performance evaluation. An auditor should make a careful review of accounting and administrative controls as they have a direct bearing on the reliability of the financial statements. His primary concern is with the accounting controls.
and of course, that is his primary concern from an auditor's perspective. However, he is still required to consider whether or not the internal administrative controls, all the way down to HR matters or whatever else of a non-accounting nature, could be going on that could potentially hurt the company's financial performance. That's the whole thing. I'm sure you've heard about the weakest link concept. We're all only as strong as our weakest link. We're all only as strong as our weakest link. In organizations, the organization is only as strong as the person who does not follow the controls protocol and therefore either ends up defrauding the company, embezzling, making multiple errors, and putting the company in jeopardy through loss of money and assets and reputation. Okay. Again, these are all very key issues. And as you can see, they are not all related to accounting, even though that's the primary focus for the auditor. When it comes to the management of the firm, they have to look at the entire administrative and accounting controls if they hope to keep the organizations together. All right, keep going.
Internal control and the auditor. The position of the auditor regarding internal control has been outlined in the Statement of Auditing Practices, which says, the duty of safeguarding the assets of a company is primarily that of management, and the auditor is entitled to rely upon the safeguard and internal controls instituted by the management. Although he will take into account the deficiencies he may note therein while drafting his audit program. It clearly means that an auditor is concerned only with the evaluation of internal control to know its strengths and weaknesses. In cases where he finds that the internal control system is inadequate, he should then plan to carry out a detailed examination of those areas where the system is weak. It is therefore necessary for the auditor to acquaint himself fully with the internal control in place and their actual operation. It will help him in the formulation of his audit program. He should bring the shortcomings of the internal control system to the management's attention.
Yes. And then finally,
Requisites of a good internal control system. The following are the essential requisites of a good internal control system. 1, a well-developed organizational plan with proper delegation of functional responsibilities should be in place. No internal control system can be effective without such a plan.
right,
2, a system of authorization and record keeping should be developed with a view to providing proper control over the assets, liabilities, revenue, and expenses of the organization. It should be developed in such a way as to ensure that A, assets are under proper custody and they are not improperly used. B, expenditures incurred get proper authorization. And C, revenues received are duly accounted for. 3,
by the way, before you go on, what do we mean by revenues received are duly accounted for? Why is it important to control that process? Revenues received are duly accounted for. What are revenues?
a profit,
Not quite, but you're on the right track. Profit comes at the end of the day after you subtract expenses from revenues. Then you have profit, hopefully. But revenue is what you get from selling goods and services. So if you're in business and you sell something, whatever you get from the sale is revenue. So if your company, if you own a dress shop, let's say one day you open up a dress shop and you hire somebody to work in your store because you can't be there 24/7 for some reason, and you don't have any controls in place, they will start selling off some of your stuff and doing what with your money if you don't have any controls. What will they do with your revenue? Some of it.
Pocket it.
Why not? People pocket stuff all the time. Some spouses can't even leave their purse or their wallet anywhere in the house. It's just that somebody start pocketing it. Jonathan, Jonathan, you were in my purse again? No, I'm your husband. Why would I be in your purse? At the time he's a gambler because he's always out there with the place name, but they're always gambling these days. What's the name of the place? The gambling house?
Mr.
Nobody knows the name of the gambling house.
Mr. Wilkinson, it's a setup. There are quite a few of them, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. And some persons are now addicted to it. They will never admit it, like any addict. You notice you can always tell when somebody's an addict to anything. You're an addict. What's the first thing they say? No, I'm not. Yes, you are. I swear I'm not. Yes, you are. On my mother's, and they just go right to the ends of the earth, and everybody knows they're an addict. And so we have a lot of gambling addicts now. So some spouses, for example, cannot leave their purse or wallet anywhere because their spouse is going to take whatever is in it to into the gambling house again because they're addicted now. Okay? I had a colleague. He said once upon a time he used to put his wallet on the table when he came home, and then after a while some funny stuff had to happen. He said, I don't believe it. So he just left it for a while. So maybe Spirit took it, or Spirit. Sorry, that's an old school word. But he eventually discovered that his wife is sneaking behind his back to the gambling houses, and she became eventually became an addict. She couldn't stop. He had to actually blah 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 to try and get her to quit, but it was not easy. So these things are very important uh, in these organizations because if you don't control these things, like I know I went out the hell the way to the other thing, but it's all about having controls in place. And if you don't, what's going to happen? Anybody ever, like for example, went to like a Chinese establishment? Do you ever see like you never notice like the Chinese stay close to the cash register? Am I the only one who noticed
They
that?
don't move. They don't
No,
move, Mr. Wilkinson.
no. They either physically doing it, or if they're not doing it, they are watching it, and they don't miss any days from work. You notice that? Like, I'll just let the Bahamians run the show that they have to stay home. They don't do that. No way. They're there. They open the door, watch all day, close the door, open the door, watch. That's a control measure to make sure that anybody who's thinking about taking something from them, no matter how small, will be detected and dealt with. Sorry, I'm just being the devil's advocate, but it's true, actually. All right, keep going, keep going. You're almost there.
Okay. A system of healthy practices and traditions should be developed with a view to discharging the duties and functions of the various departments of the organization in an orderly and ethical manner.
Ethical, yes. Keep going.
Since internal control systems are to be exercised by the personnel employed by the organization, they should be a team of people with sound character and integrity who are properly trained and capable of discharging their responsibilities.
Is that does that happen to be my students in this class?
Yes.
That's what I want to hear. Doggone it, without hesitation. I don't want a hesitation. I know I'm being a devil's advocate, but I'm just saying it to remind you of how important it is, not only to the study of audits, to the auditor, but also even to you in your everyday professional and personal lives. That's my point. Okay? That this thing is not just purely academic to get through some examination. This thing is real. All right. And then finally,
5. Constant managerial supervision and periodical reviews of the system should be introduced with a view to making the system more efficient and effective.
thank you very much, Lishan. Thank you, Araminta. You guys have been great. You've held up the fort in the absence of your other two colleagues who are dealing with whatever they're dealing with. Certainly, when we come next week, we will garner them. It'll be their time while you guys kick back and listen and have a martini. Not martini, but you know what I mean. So you did a great job. Please keep reading, keep making your notes. go ahead into the next module. Once you're done with the current 3 modules that you're supposed to be current on, and I know it's going to be a little testy, especially for working people, and if you have other responsibilities. But I say to you, um, just put in the extra effort, sleep for an hour or two less, study however you study, put in the extra time. It's going to challenge you, I know. But remember, the very best things in life comes through stress and effort and pain and suffering, unfortunately. All right. Also, if you have any questions or issues while you're reviewing, making notes, whatever that you want to raise, you don't want to wait until the next class, please feel free to send me an email or a text and I'll be happy to answer it. Okay, you do not have to wait until the next question to raise an issue or a concern. It would be my pleasure. All right. So until next week, you guys have a safe week. Keep studying, keep making notes, keep reviewing. If you do that, you give yourself a better opportunity of getting that great grade that you're seeking, that we all seek as students. All right. And I'll see you next week.
Okay, good night to all.
Good night.
Okay,
Take
good
care.
night, good night. Take
Night.
care.
Pleasure, you guys. Take care out there.
Yes, sir. Okay.